When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel, his daughter, stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. Good morning, people of God. Come to you this morning from Genesis chapter 31, beginning at verse 19. An interesting story telling us about our forefathers, one of the patriarchs, Jacob. Jacob is the son of Isaac and the grandson of Abraham. And Jacob has been working for this man named Laban for 14 years. He worked 7 years for his wife Leah, which really he was tricked because he had fell in love with Rachel, and so he was working for Rachel, and Laban tricked Jacob by not giving him Rachel, instead giving him Leah. So Jacob then worked 7 more years. I'm sure you know the story. He worked 7 more years so that he could be given Rachel's hand in marriage, the wife that he originally fell in love with in the first place. Altogether, after it was all said and done, Jacob had worked 20 years for Laban before he decided it was time for him to leave. Jacob was living in Padam Aram, and he was ready to head back. God had come to him in a vision, in a dream, and told him to go back to the land in which he was raised and go back to the Holy Land, the land of Canaan. God was ready to send Jacob back. But before he left, he sent word out to the fields that Rachel and Leah should come in, and they should gather all their things, all their children, all their belongings, and they were going to head out and sneak out overnight without telling Laban. Jacob was afraid that Laban would deceive him again. But he said in this scripture that Laban had deceived him 10 times by changing his wages. And so Laban had played several little tricks on Jacob just to get him to stay, because as long as Jacob was there, Laban was being blessed. And so now Jacob has convinced the daughters, Leah and Rachel, the daughters of Laban, that they should leave with him, that God had given him all of their father's inheritance, that God had blessed him with whatever their father had. And so now Jacob is about to leave with his family. But before they leave, an interesting thing happened, and it's where I want to focus our attention this morning. Yes, Laban was not being upright with Jacob, and Laban wasn't really in tune with the God of Jacob. He was really just using Jacob for the blessings that God was giving him, and that's a whole another lesson. But now we find where Rachel, the youngest daughter of Laban, before they leave, before she gets with her husband Jacob and her sister Leah, and before they travel off to the land that God had promised to give them, before they do that, the Bible says that Rachel takes her father's gods. Yeah, Laban was practicing a different religion. He had some idols that that he kept around the house. It wasn't uncommon for men of that day to have idol gods in their pockets and in their homes. Some were large, some were small, travel size, if you will. They would put them and keep them in their pocket for good luck, and they would pray to them and sacrifice and do all these things for their idol gods, and made of wood and stone. And so Rachel had been raised in this, and now Rachel was caught between, what I like to say, a rock and a hard place. One, Rachel was raised with these false and idol gods, worshiping them with her father for a mighty long time. If Jacob worked for Laban for 20 years, when he met Rachel, she had to be at least 12 or 13. So here Rachel was in this environment of idol worship for about 30 years or so. And now she's been introduced to Jacob, who has introduced her to the God of his fathers, Abraham and Isaac. And now Rachel is caught between a rock and a hard place. One, do I stick with what I know, with my father, what he's taught me for all these umpteen years, or do I go with the new God that has been introduced to me by my husband, the God of Abraham and Isaac and the God of Jacob? Do I stick with this spiritual God who has blessed my husband, has given him all these gifts? My husband's been praying to him and talking to him and worshiping him and being obedient to him and doing what this God has called him to do. Or do I stick with these idols? Rachel decides she's going to play both sides. She's going to hold on to her father's God, but also follow Jacob, her husband, who's trusting in the Lord of all creation. You know, like Rachel, I think we all go through this in our lives at some point. We get stuck in this place where we've got old habits and old ideas and old thoughts. We've been raised a particular way, taught a particular thing about worship, about God, about our spiritual growth, about marriage, about home, raising kids, whatever it may be. We get these thoughts in our mind. We've been raised a certain way. But when we're introduced to God, it puts us in an awkward position. Do I stick with my old grandma faith, what I like to call it, the old faith that I've been raised up with it, which isn't bad per se, but I've been taught this one thing all of my life. But now I've been introduced to this God, this new God, this God who was from day one, but yet I've been introduced to him in a different way. And it's beautiful and wonderful. And I can see the power, that I know about the grace and the mercy and love of God. But I still have some connections to these idols. Rachel could struggle with leaving her past behind. She saw what God was doing for her husband, Jacob. She saw the new thing that was happening. She was impressed by it. She was so happy and thankful to have a husband who worshiped and honored God and also loved her. But at the same time, she still held on to an old faith and an old belief, so much so that she stole her father's God. Now that doesn't seem to go together. That's like oil and water. You know, a God that you have to steal and take with you. Rachel was trying to go to a new place, but holding on to the old stuff. Some of you today are like Rachel. You know about this God of heaven, this God of the universe. You know that he's gifted you with some talents and that he's blessed you. You know that he's rescued you from some difficult situations. And you know that he's a God of salvation, a God of redemption, a God of reconciliation. And you've heard about him for a while, but you've been holding on to an old past faith, something you was raised in. Something that's difficult to let go because of your tradition. You see, Rachel was caught in tradition. She wasn't quite ready to let it go. Laban chases him down, and Laban is looking for his idols. He was angry because Jacob had snuck away in the night with his daughters and grandchildren, but he was even more angry because someone had stolen his gods. He believed that Jacob had taken his gods. You see, Laban thought that he had even changed Jacob's mind. Laban not only made an impression on his daughters Leah and Rachel, but he thought that he had also impressed Jacob, so much so that Jacob would take his gods. But Jacob wasn't trying to hold on to anything that Laban had. Jacob had already been introduced to the God who could do all things, who has all power to change. He has power over life and death, the power to change lives. And he wasn't holding on, but the problem was his wife was. I want to say this to you married folk and to you folks out there raising kids, folks in relationships. Sometimes you hold on to things that you've been taught. Sometimes you hold on to some of the scars that you had in your past. Sometimes you hold on to idol gods when there's a new thing God is trying to do in your life or in your relationship that may look totally different than what your mother, father, grandmother experienced. something that's better. It looks different. It's not harsh or hurtful, but it's just different. And maybe you're not used to it. Maybe you're trying to hold on to what your granny taught you, or your mama taught you, which may have been good. But in your situation right now, it may take something extra, something different than what you've been raised in. Rachel was holding on to idol gods. She had stole them and stuck them in her pouch, and she was sitting on them and didn't want to give them up. She was stuck between trying to worship a God of spirit and a God made of wood and stone. Have you been stuck in that place where you still holding on to your traditions that you've been taught? And they just don't seem to fit in where God is trying to take you. They've hindered you and held you back, but you've held on to them because it brings you comfort and peace. Maybe some old ideologies, some old practices, some old habits that you've taken with you into 2018, and it's time for you to let them go. You can't bring old habits into a new place and a new position. You have to change sometimes your faith and how you operate in faith. You got to increase your faith in this God, your trust, your hope, and belief in him. Don't bring in the old gods when you are now walking with the new God of the universe. I want to encourage some of you right now to be faithful to God. Some of the old habits, the old idols that you had back in your past a year ago, it's time to let them go. Don't be like Rachel and be worshiping a God of truth and walking with a husband who knows the God of truth, and you seen God bless him, and now you hanging with him, or a wife that you seen God bless. You know that this is the true God, but you too busy holding on to what you believe and what you've been taught. You're holding on to idols, and an idol will never get you to the place that God has ordained for you. Let it go. Be blessed. Endure through all your trials and know that God is with you.